Clay, thank you so much for being here on the Learning Leader Show. It's and also welcoming us to Aileron. This is one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever been in. Your campus is incredible, so thank you so much for having us.
Well, thanks for coming out.
And I like to get started by understanding, especially from somebody like you who has met so many incredible people. You have sustained excellence in your own right. And I look at others in the world, and that's really what my podcast is about. The Learning Leader Show is about understanding the people who sustain excellence and how they do it and why they do it and what goes on behind it and the stories as well. So I'm curious, what have you found to be the commonalities among people who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
Well, I think they have a vision of what they want to do, where they want to go. And they have a fairly good idea of how to get there. Not totally, but for the most part. Mm-hmm. And they're committed to that. I think in my case, I had 4 things I wanted to do. And fortunately, the good Lord has given me the resources to do them all. And now, not very well, a couple of them not very well, but yeah. I've had that opportunity.
What are the 4 things?
The 4 things was, number 1, I wanted to own my own business, which everybody thought I was crazy because I was born and raised on a farm in northern Ohio. And nobody ever ran a business. You went to work in a factory or you became a farmer or whatever. And then once I had the opportunity to own my own business, then I wanted to have that business be something that was excellent, that stood for something. And so we built Iams around those basic principles. I said to several people that if, in fact, I was successful and the business grew, I had resources then available to do this, which is to help entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Like I had been helped by a lot of.
So you had the vision for Aileron at the beginning?
I had the vision for having a program for entrepreneurs so that I could share my knowledge with them, as a lot of my mentors had done with me. And then the last one, which I haven't done very well, is to use our technology that we learned, the learnings we used at Iams, to help develop food for indigenous people primarily in Guatemala, Honduras, mm-hmm. and those parts of Central America. And we've done that, but we haven't done a very good job of getting it distributed yet. And so that's kind of what I'm working on.
Can you take me back to the beginning when you were working at Iams? I believe there was $13 million in sales at the time, and you were an employee and you purchased the business. Is that correct? Or walk me through that story. I'm curious. I love the beginnings of stories to figure out how things went from here to here.
Well, I hired on with Iams in 1970.
Okay. What were you doing before that?
I worked at Campbell Soup Company.
Okay.
I was an executive at Campbell Soup.
Okay.
In the operations side of the business. And so a friend of mine told me about Paul Iams. And so I beat my way down to Dayton one time and stopped in to see him. And he and I hit it off pretty well. And I didn't realize he was looking for somebody to come into his business because his kids didn't want to be a part of the pet food business. And so one thing led to another. He hired me as a general manager, whatever you want to call it. I was his 7th employee. And I tell people that I had a dog food dogs wouldn't eat and a package consumers wouldn't buy. So it took me 5 years to figure that out. It took me another 5 years to fix it.
Wow.
So that takes us up to about 1980, 1981, where in 1975, he was thinking about selling the business or closing the business, and I convinced him that he ought to sell part of it to me, and I bought half of it in 75, and then I bought the rest of it in 1981.
1981.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so from
he retired. He wanted to retire.
Yeah.
He wanted to buy a home in Phoenix.
Yeah.
He wanted enough money from the business to be able to do that, and
Yeah.
we were able to put that deal together.
This may not be a good question, but how did you have the money to buy it?
I didn't. I borrowed it.
Okay. Why you and not somebody else at that time?
Well, because he'd seen me work,
Yeah.
and he'd seen me make a big impact on the business.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted me to have it.
What were some of the things you were doing that he saw you did that made him think Clay's the guy for this?
Well, I think I had a different way of sales. Our sales and marketing strategies changed. And I spent a lot of time working dog shows, visiting with veterinarians, not really focused on consumers. And the involvement with the breeders, for example, got us a lot of reputation, and we were able to, grow the business based on the influencers. And so our whole marketing programs were all designed around the influencers, not about the user, but about the person who impacts the user, which would be the breeder and the veterinarian.
Wow. And so you were, it feels like ahead of your time in the way you thought about that.
There were people doing it, but not the way we were doing it.
Yeah.
And there were people trying to build a product, but nobody really had the resources and the knowledge at that time to do it. They have it today, but not then. So
you take the helm, and I know I'm shortening the story, but you supercharge the business, and to eventually where you guys are doing $1 billion in revenue to an eventual sale.
Well, I went to the president's course at American Management in 1982, right after I bought the business. My wife and I were talking one night about, we got this business, one of your dreams has been, fulfilled, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I know, but I'm scared to death. I don't know how to run a business. Been 20 years since I've been in school, and then I only took a couple of management courses. So I needed to learn. She said, well, you need to learn how to run a business then. So that's the first thing I did, is I went out and found an organization that I felt could teach me how to run a business. And I came across this president's course at American Management Association. And that changed everything. That changed the whole game.
Why is that?
Because my vision, or my threshold, if you will, was for about $100 million business over my lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, we did $100 million in 4 years. We did another $100 million in 4 years, and we doubled our business every year after that until 1999 when we sold the company.
Wow. What went into the decision to sell the company?
Well, in 1990, I hired a president, which is a little unusual because I was 49, and again, we go back to the fact that I was really not a good operator. I was more of a visionary. I could do strategy pretty well, but as far as operations, I wasn't very good. And my board, I put together an outside board in '86. In 1989, they were ready to fire me because they felt, and they were right, that I needed an operating head. And I found a guy. He was at Sara Lee, had been at PepsiCo, had been at Wilson Sporting Goods, and he had been president since he was 49. He had been a president of a company from the time he was 49 years old. Football player from Cornell.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're speaking my language?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we brought him in, and he built the business from about $200 million to $1 billion in 9 years.
Wow.
And so after my last kid graduated from college, which was in 1995, we as a family sat down and said, okay, what do we want to do with this business? Anybody want to run it? And nobody wanted to.
Really?
Nobody wanted to.
That's surprising.
Well, I think they were intimidated.
Yeah.
The business was quite big. We had 2,000 employees, and we're doing business in 70 countries. We're doing over $1 billion in sales. We had about 120 million EBITDA, and so that was a big operation.
Yeah.
And they all wanted to chase their own dreams, their own passions. My son Michael had a dream of being a professional baseball player, but that didn't work out. And my one son, Tim, he wanted to run his own business. And so he bought a company, and he's done well with it. So anyway, we decided then that, okay, nobody coming into the business, what are we going to do? So we started looking at options, going public, acquiring another business, selling. And about the time we're going through this process, we get a call from Dirk Jager, who was CEO of P&G. And unbeknownst to me, P&G was looking hard at the pet industry, because pet food or pet supplies and food was a bigger category than soap. And they started looking at this as a household item, and this is a category of over 10 billion domestic, and we're not in it. And so he got them in the pet food business, and we felt that was the best option for us to go, because they didn't have a pet food business, so therefore all the employees that I had, they were going to need.
Yeah.
And there were a few that they didn't, but we had generous severances for everybody, and it was a good deal.
Do you can you take us inside the negotiation? The reason I bring this up, I spoke with Todd Wagner, and Todd started broadcast.com with Mark Cuban, and he took us inside the room when Yahoo bought him for $5.7 billion, and it was contentious at times, but they came to a good deal for everybody.
Yeah.
What was it like in the, I don't even know what it would look like, or who's in the room, what are you talking about? Is it contentious? Do you start high and then meet in the middle? How does that work?
Well, in our case, I mean, we had an investment banker. They had been talking to other acquirers and the merger opportunities, a lot of different options. So with P&G, Dirk Yager called and said, we'd like to come talk to you. Okay. And I want to bring my top 6 C-level people.
Sure.
And we met with Mary and I and Tom McLeod, a couple people, and they presented their case of why we should sell to them. And everything that they proposed is what we had hoped for. So the negotiating was pretty simple. We told them what our number was. They actually exceeded it.
Wow.
And I just told them I wanted an evaluation with the 2B in front of it, and ended up with 2.3. But it was very little hard negotiations going on at that point.
What happens next? Because there's a lot in the news right now, unfortunately, about some of the tough things that happen to entrepreneurs when they sell, when they exit. Depression, suicide, real challenges.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's because the thrill of the build is not there anymore, and the money doesn't fulfill any. They can buy boats and cars and houses, but it doesn't. That building stage is gone, and sometimes they try to build something else and it doesn't work. What was walk me through what happened next after you get this $2.3 billion for a sale, and now what?
Well, in anticipation for a sale, I started a family office, because I knew that my family was going to need the expertise of legal, accounting, finance, investments. So we set up a family office. And once I sold the business, I just moved down the street. And I started running the family office, started building that organization for the future. So I really didn't, and it was right down the street, and I had access to the people, and a lot of people would still call me and ask for my advice and all of that. And it was just a really good feeling all the way around, and I had plenty to do.
So there wasn't that feeling?
Yeah, and I've stayed busy ever since.
Ever since.
Yeah.
And that year was?
97.
97. Wow. So then Aileron is created when?
Well, I mean, Aileron started as the Center for Entrepreneurial Education in 1994.
Okay.
We opened this facility about 10 years.
2008.
Yeah.
2008?
Going on 11 years, 10 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Aileron, so I saw this on your sign, a movable flap on the trailing edge of an airplane wing that gives lift and guidance to the airplane. And
Yeah.
I assume that name's chosen for a reason. That makes sense.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Give the lift and guidance to the business owner.
Yeah. What made you want to start a place like this? Because you could easily retire and have 50 houses and fly all over and travel, and you decide to invest a lot of time here. I know you just mentioned that you're here a couple times a week in certain months that you also travel, but why? Why do this?
Well, as I said, I had a debt to pay to a lot of my mentors who gave me a lot back in the days when I was struggling. And many of these guys, I used to say, hey, how could I possibly repay you? And they all said, you don't have to repay me, just pass it on. And so that's the whole philosophy of, I knew too that business owners needed education more than anything else. And we did a lot of surveys. I talked to a lot of business owners. I talked to universities. Mm-hmm. That's the last place I would want to put this place, is at a university. Because that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for immediate help to a problem that they have right now. Mm-hmm. And most business owners that come to us come because they have some kind of a problem. Mm-hmm. And we have designed this place to be available and to be ready and to be prepared for their telling us of their problem. And most of these problems that we see here are problems we've seen before. Mm-hmm. Not the same problem, but very similar in many ways.
And you're teaching, right? You teach presidents?
I do some
teaching?
Lecturing at the President's Course. I do some mentoring with some of the entrepreneurs who have some specific issues that they need some help with, primarily succession.
Okay.
From one generation to the next.
Yeah. So are those the common issues? What are some of the other common issues?
Well, they're all, it's very interesting. We watch businesses come through here, succeed. Most of the entrepreneurs are in their 50s.
Okay.
They're making a lot of money. They look around, what happened to time, or what happened to Little League baseball games and all the other things that we gave up. I've got kids that are turned off the business primarily because they never saw Dad for the 15 years or 20 years. And so what we can do is we can guide them a little bit into with some consultants or some people who can help them think through this issue, which is really traumatic in many ways. And we have the answers here. If we don't have the answers here, we will find them.
Yeah. It's funny or interesting, I talked to Mike at this event, Mike and your son Mike, and we did an event, and I found him to be this great combination of kind, confident, and very humble, which you never know what to expect the son of a billionaire. Mm-hmm. He could be the opposite of all of those things. And so it led me to believe that you guys have to have some sort of process for how you parent. Mm-hmm. It's something, as a dad, I'm always interested in learning about this as well, because I think there are a lot of similarities in parenting from a leadership perspective for your kids as there is in running a business. And you mentioned how some of these entrepreneurs are in their 50s, they have a lot of money, but then they never saw their kids.
I was one of those.
You were one of those?
Absolutely.
Really?
I mean, I saw my kids, but not as much as I should have.
So how did your kids turn out so good?
They had a great mother.
Yeah. So you made a wise choice in a spouse?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. The most important decision we all make, I think.
Yeah, we've known each other for 60 years.
Okay.
We've been married for 55 years. Wow. So I got lucky the first time.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, when I was home, though, I was home. I wasn't out playing golf. I wasn't out playing tennis with my buddies. When I was home, I stayed home. Yeah. And that was important, too.
You're present.
Yeah, I was present.
You were present.
But I traveled a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was just part of the job.
Part of the job.
What are the keys to a great marriage?
Trust. You got to like the person, too.
You got to like the person.
Not just trust. Love, but like.
Yeah.
And trust.
You got to like hanging out with them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I felt that from Mike. So I think at any time, I know.
I think raised in a faithful household too is important.
Yeah.
We had faith, and our kids have all. I think for the most part they all go to church. And,
yeah. What do you think about sports? What do you think about sports for kids? I know Mike was a professional baseball player.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I played sports, all through high school. That's all I really cared about doing.
Really?
When I went to college, it was because I wanted to play basketball, not because I wanted to get an education.
Yeah.
But it soon taught me I better get an education, because I wasn't going to make any money playing basketball.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys stress here, I know at Aileron, and Mike famously, or Mike quoted you saying, if I had a hot dog stand, I would have a board. Can you talk to me about the importance of why everyone should have a board?
Well, board sees things you don't see. And especially if you have experienced board members, they've probably been through a lot of the trials and tribulations that you're experiencing now. Mm-hmm. And having that overview, and that strategic overview is just something that you can't do yourself.
Yeah.
You know, after you've been in that job for 10 years, 75% of all the problems that you're having in your business is because of you. And if you aren't willing to accept that, you can't move forward. And that's hard for business owners, especially business owners that have made a lot of money. Yeah. Some of the worst clients we have are the ones that need us the most. Mm-hmm. But they've made a lot of money, and it's just like, what do I need this for? Yeah. I can buy and sell this place out of my front pocket. Well, it's just not about dollars and cents.
Right. There's a lot of people listening who are individual contributors at a company, who are mid-level managers, and one of the things I've learned after doing more than 260 of these conversations from some really incredible leaders is the importance of a personal board of advisors. And you already mentioned that you wanted to pay it forward based on the great mentorship that you had. What advice do you give to somebody who is in that position? Not necessarily a business owner, but an individual contributor. Maybe they have ambitions of starting their own business at some point, or they want to just progress within the business they're in, as far as having mentors or any type of career advice for people in that space.
Well, as far as having a personal board, I mean, all of my boards were private. Were actually they're not formal boards. They were informal boards.
Oh, okay.
Because look at it this way: you own all the stock. You can do anything you want, right? And there's no sense in having a vote. I'd never had a vote in all the years I had a board. I never had a vote. Mm-hmm. Because if it came down to 5-4, I got to convince those other 4, or at least 2 of those other 4, before I'm comfortable. Mm-hmm. And during that exercise, going through that exercise was tremendously valuable. As far as senior executives, I just recommend mentors. You find them all over the place. A lot of corporate guys think that there aren't mentors out there, both privately owned and public guys, that would be willing to spend a little time with me, but that's not true. They would. Mm-hmm. All you got to do is ask them. Mm-hmm. I have never, ever had anybody turn me down if I asked them to help me.
Even when you were younger and earlier in your career?
Yeah, even when I was
How do you
younger.
handle it as a mentor yourself now? Because I would imagine
I anticipate questions.
Okay.
To start the conversation. You got to start the conversation. You got to build trust and mutual respect.
Yeah.
And then you go from there.
Yeah.
And
is that make up a big portion of your days now? Are you mentoring a lot of people, or how does that work?
I don't know. I say make up. I would say that I probably spend 2 days a month.
Okay.
With business owners. But some days some months it's more, some months it's less.
Yeah.
I turn them over because they're tired of hearing me talk. We'll find somebody else for you.
Yeah.
And I find a lot of networking. I help network from my data, from my contact list. I can help a person over here who happens to be in the trucking business with somebody who's interested in logistics, put those 2 people together.
Yeah.
And let them go.
Yeah. So what about culture? I know that was big. I was reading through your book, Run Your Business, Don't Let It Run You, and about the importance of growing people and the importance of building your culture and being very deliberate. Because I've learned through the course of doing this as well that culture is just what is real within your business. It's there no matter what you think.
Right. Or no matter what you do.
Right. And so you have to be cognizant of that and think about that. So what was your approach to building the kind of culture as a place where people would want to go to work?
I built it so I could work in it. And I had certain strange things about my management style.
Strange things?
Strange.
What's strange?
Well, I was probably I was probably promoting empowerment before it was popular.
Huh.
I just believed that most people do the right things for the right reasons if you put them in the right environment. And that's what we were trying to do, is we were trying to do the right things for the right reasons. If we are doing those things, even though we're making mistakes, we're making progress. The other thing that we build is the value of the individual. So important that you think highly of the individual, that you treat them with respect, and they feel important. And every employee, I think, at Iams Company felt they were special, that they were important. And one of the reasons they did is because I got to see them at least once a year. Every single employee, no matter where it was in the world, I got to see them and shake hands with them once a year, and preferably with their families, with their spouses.
Really?
Yes.
So I get this sense that you feel that people are inherently good and just.
They're inherently good, and they're productive.
Yeah, I think of the bad
They
bosses.
want to produce.
Yeah, the bad bosses I've had, and they are they don't trust people. They over the top micromanagement. The opposite of
big egos.
Huge egos. Usually really insecure.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. I guess because I think in the short term there's a chance it could work, but long term there's no chance that works, and and you have probably high turnover as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And
so it's not rocket science.
Was that rampant though when you were getting this empowerment movement going at Iams early, or what was the landscape like at that time?
Well, when we had the 7 employees, it was based on the west side of Dayton over here.
Yeah.
But we had just average folks that came to work every day with a positive attitude. And what was interesting about that plant, we never closed that plant. We just made some changes in what we produced in that plant. Mm-hmm. But every year when we did our attitude survey, Delphus Avenue plant, west side of Dayton, had the highest rating of any of the facilities we had around the world in terms of values. And it came from the founder, and I think myself, being there on the ground every day, and we could demonstrate our values.
You had a frontline obsession. Were you there, meaning you're a part of it for your whole career? You felt like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I feel like that's a big deal when it comes to cultures. They see their leader who's with them.
Well, it's a big buzzword now, culture.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's huge.
Everybody's talking about culture, and it's not rocket science. It's very difficult to shift your culture to the culture you want, and it's very difficult to maintain it on a day-to-day basis.
Why?
Because people come from different directions.
Yeah.
And you think they're clear about what you want, but when you really bore down, they're really not sure. And they're not, in many cases, they're afraid to ask, or they're afraid to move outside their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And see, you got to make sure that if you let them move outside their comfort zone, you don't beat them to death if they make a mistake. See, that was the other thing, the right to fail. That was one of our values. Everyone should have the right to fail. Mm-hmm. That's easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah. You got to be able to live with the failures.
Well,
and learn.
Is the owner or the leader willing to accept the failures?
Yeah.
The employees will accept it if you'll accept it.
Yeah. What about, so when you were at 6 or 7 employees, I would imagine you're doing a bit of everything. Everybody probably is. At some point, you shift to being a manager of people, right? And so there are a lot of people as well listening who, I remember vividly when I made this jump from I was in sales, an individual contributor to a manager. And I think I probably made hundreds of mistakes. Most were my fault from not seeking enough advice and just, it was bad for a while. And I learned and got a bit better eventually. But I'm curious, for the person listening who's in the midst of making that jump, they desire to make that jump. Maybe they've already made that jump a year ago, but they haven't had any guidance. What advice would you give to that person who's going from individual contributor to now a boss, a manager? Because leaders, anyone can lead. I don't think you need a title to be a leader, but a manager and a boss is different. It is part of a title of leading people.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to accept the fact that management is a profession. As engineering is a profession, as medicine is a profession, as sales is a profession. But just because you're the best salesman doesn't mean that you're going to be the best sales manager.
Right.
In many cases, it's not the best salesman that's the best sales manager. You know that from your sports experience. How many quarterbacks do you know?
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks do you know that are professional or become NFL coaches?
Yeah, it's usually the backup or the third stringer,
It's the third string
they
guy.
really need to understand everything just to hang on. Whereas
Exactly.
the star
Yeah.
is more Jordan-esque, where it comes a little bit more naturally, and they're not a good coach.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. So
Yeah.
you have to think about it. All right, I'm going to become a manager now. Now the leader has got to understand that too. And we got to give you the skills. We just don't go ahead and go out there and cover the territory. No, you got to sit back and you got to think about strategically, what do I do first? What do I do second? How do I build controls in place?
Mm-hmm.
All of those things.
Yeah.
That's professional management.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't train our people to go from hourly employee to supervisor, or from salesman to sales manager, or from an engineering department to a manager. Those are the tough ones.
Mm-hmm. The first jump, I think, it seems like the hardest. But when you go from individual to now you're managing people, even harder than some of the other bigger.
Well, and especially if you're managing your peers, your former peers.
Which most people do. Yeah.
Phew,
It's tough.
really tough.
Yeah. Do you are those types of people as a part of your network that you're helping out?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you tell them? Like, come to Aileron, take a class, find other mentors who've done it before you?
Well, take the management course for presidents. That's the first one. And then your senior managers, we have a course for senior managers very similar to the president's course. We just call it senior management course, senior managers. And that's a 2-day course. And the CEO course is a 2.5-day course. Yeah, it takes the presidents 40% longer to get it.
Really? Why is that?
I'm just kidding.
What do you think? What are some of the biggest mistakes those first-time managers make?
If they've never managed before, and I like to think it's the supervisor first, then the manager.
Okay.
So the supervisor is the first line. The manager is managing through 2 or 3 levels.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the skills that a supervisor needs, and then what are the skills a manager needs? And we kind of skip over the supervisor. But that's the one where your competency needs to be developing others. And your job is to develop others. That's your job. Not to continue to ring up sales and not to produce more stuff, but to manage through and develop others.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing you need to have as a supervisor is you need to manage spontaneity, responsiveness. You don't react, you proact. And too many people, when they become a supervisor, oh, this happened, oh my God,
Put out fires.
Yeah, and they hit the,
How do you become a proactive leader?
We have to learn that.
Yeah.
You have to learn that. A good example of a proactive leader is a fire chief. The fire chief, when the bell rings, he doesn't just get in the truck, right? What does he do or she do? They look at, where's the fire? What's the source of the fire? Why? So I know what kind of trucks to send, or so many people to go. Do I need a rescue squad or not? All that kind of stuff. That is management. So he's managing crisis.
So I mentioned your book, and I found it interesting because you really focus on growing your people, and you mentioned that before. And I think that seems to be the key, and we talk about that at Brixey Meyer. That's one of the values of taking care of our team members, growing each other. And I know in my previous role as a VP of sales at a big company in North America, and I tried to spend a lot of time doing skip level meetings with individual contributors on their career development. However, I was hit with resistance from leadership because of the fact of maybe disagreements in what your job really is. And I feel like as a leader of people, that is absolutely my job versus just worrying about the sales forecast or worrying about the next month.
Grow people.
Right. I mean, I feel like I love that aspect of your belief system. And I was talking that before, that whether it's Joni or Cole or everybody here, that's a true, you live that out at Aileron just like you did at Iams, and it seems just a life principle of yours.
Well, in '84, we built the Iams University.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I built it is because my plants are becoming automated. And I wanted to automate my plants, but I didn't want to displace my people.
Yeah.
So we built Iams University to help them learn how to use a computer, how to run a computer in the operating floor, and also to help implement automation. And every single one of those people that help basically eliminate their job, we found another job for them. And in 1984, our productivity per employee, our sales dollars per employee, was 150,000 in 1984. 1999, when we sold the business, our productivity per employee was 500,000.
Wow.
Through training and development of people. That's how we got there. Not by driving them, not by squeezing the budget, by teaching them. And the thing about it is, teach them the things that they want to know. We had a fellow who ran our distribution operation in Kansas City, who all of a sudden one day said, I want to become a minister. Okay, we're going to help you become a minister. So we put our plans in place for him to exit after he had the opportunity to go to seminary, go to ministry school. And to this day, I think, he is still a minister in Kansas City, Missouri. And that, I mean, put people in a position that they're passionate about, and they'll do great things.
And I sense that what you're most passionate about are taking care of people and serving them.
Teaching them, developing them, not necessarily taking care of them. I mean, that could be misconstrued. But
what do you mean?
Well, you can't take care. You don't want to be totally in service. Okay. But you certainly want to focus on what it is that they want to do. What is their dream? Matthew Kelly, we talked about Matthew Kelly. He has a book. He wrote a book called Dream Manager. If you haven't read it, I recommend you read it. It's a terrific book about managing people's dreams. And that's really what we're all about, is managing your dreams. And if your dreams do not include working at the Iams Company, we'll find something for you and get somebody in here who really loves the company, loves what they do.
Yeah.
There were some people that didn't like dogs and cats. How the heck did we hire those people? I don't know.
Yeah. Let's fast forward to today. What's your day-to-day like now? What are some of the challenges you go through, or is it how much work, how much family, how much fun, or is it all together? How does it work?
I do about anything I want to do.
That's awesome.
I am fortunate to have the resources to do just about anything I want to do. And some days it's nothing, and some days it's a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in the morning I don't know what I'm going to do, but by noon or afternoon I've got somebody who wants to have lunch or wants to have a cup of coffee, or come over here and walk around, go down to the cafe and see who's down there.
Well, this
and I think it's important. I think it's important that I walk around this place. At least my staff tells me that it's important. I enjoy meeting with the staff and talking to them about their business, about their future.
Yeah.
And even though Nicole's going to get married next year, I try to talk her out of it. But
Oh, that's great. Well,
I wish I had a grandson that was of that age.
That's great. Well, Clay, this place is beautiful. I'm just so appreciative of you welcoming us here.
Great to have you.
Yeah, it's so nice that you have built this place for people to make things happen, to make an impact on the lives of leaders. And I know that you enjoy people who are willing to put up their own capital to create jobs for other people.
That's right.
I've heard you say that many times, and I that's an admirable thing that you're here to help those people make that happen.
Well, we're happy. The one dream for this place.
Yeah.
It will survive forever.
Yeah.
That's my dream.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't see
Well,
how.
that's what we're building it for.
Building it for to strive forever. Well, I appreciate it. One more question I had. So the title of my show is The Learning Leader Show, and I love that phrase because I think about the greatest leaders I've ever been around, and they have an intellectual curiosity about getting better, about growing, about improvement, and you have to be a constant learner to be doing that. And I'm curious, when you heard that a guy reached out to you who runs a show called The Learning Leader Show, what was your thought on that specific phrase initially when you heard that?
Yeah. I like it. There are a lot of leaders that are not continuous learners.
Yeah.
And over time, they won't be good leaders.
Yeah.
You've got to be continuous learners.
Yeah.
Who are some of your favorite leaders?
My dad is probably, I would say,
Beautiful.
The first person that comes to mind. Both as a husband, a dad, and he was a business leader. He led a 1,000-person sales force for many years and just retired, but still active and giving talks and helping people, consulting, and doing a lot of things for people where I know that we don't even know about. But he's the first one that comes to mind, I would say, when it comes to a good model. And that's just a pure luck thing. Mike and I talked a little bit about that when we were talking, that sometimes you just get lucky, and when you do, as I told him, I try not to mess that up. You want to do the best with what you're given, because we didn't really do anything to deserve that. And
I'd rather be lucky than good.
Really?
Any day.
What about both?
Sure, I'll take that.
Yeah. Do you feel, how much of your success do you feel is luck, and how much is effort? 60%. 60% luck? Why?
Being at the right place at the right time. A simple example. Paul Iams told me about 10 years after I had been with him that if I hadn't have called him when we were in the interviewing process, if I hadn't have called him, he'd never hired me. And I was lamenting about him not calling me when my wife told me. She said, well, call him. Pick up the phone and call him.
Yeah.
Duh.
Be proactive.
I called him, he hired me over the phone.
Wow.
If I wouldn't have called him, he'd never hired me.
And then what happened?
So then, how do you...
The ripple effect of the people, it's incredible.
I don't know many people who were non-family that ever ended up owning a company like this. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. I was the hired gun, and how I ended up owning this thing was just pure luck.
Wow.
So, don't get too carried away with, how smart you are, how good looking you are, what a great this you are. It's about, I don't know, what do you attribute to your success? How much of it is luck?
Well, like I said, I was born into an incredibly lucky situation.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Without that, my school district had great football coaches, which taught me how to work. Yeah. So I had the luck of parents, the luck of coaches. Without that, I'm not a talented enough athlete to get a college scholarship, but I was able to because I had good coaches. Because we were lucky at the time. So I would say a high percentage of it is based on a lot of good fortune. That's why I said now it's on me not to mess it up, and to try to build upon that and build on that, and realize too, it helps me with perspective too. Like I think of Maurice Claret. He got in a lot of trouble after he played with my younger brother at Ohio State, and he's a good guy, but he made some terrible choices. But when I talked to him on this show, it gave me good perspective because his upbringing was the opposite of mine.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
And not that you should use that as an excuse, but I do understand perspective a lot better now after having talked to people like that, and it makes me not take it for granted. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
So.
No, the point about your listeners is they need to think about their development, but they also need to think about how they're going to pass it on.
Yeah.
Everybody is ultimately going to have to pass on something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your favorite watch, my favorite watch is going to my oldest grandson. Okay, that's passing it on.
Yeah.
And a lot of your folks are middle line managers. Don't think about passing it on, but they need to start thinking about passing it on. And especially if you want to become a senior manager and you want to develop people, passing it on is part of that building the culture.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think the true mark of a great leader is what happens when they're gone.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, how does a team perform when you're not there anymore? Have you set it up properly when you were there for success, even more success when you're gone? And I think the insecure one might say, oh, they're not going to be anything without me there, where the true excellent leaders are the ones that have a lot of pride in something you just said, that like some Aileron will go on forever, and how the success of a team, of a place, of whatever it is, after they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
They've moved on to something else.
Right.
They're not a part of it. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clay, so much for being here. Where would you send the people listening to learn more about Aileron, learn more about you?
Our website,
okay,
and aileron.org, and love to have you come out. Just come out and take a look.
Yep.
You don't have to sign up for a course, but
for the audio people, that we have this on video too, but for the audio people, just it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life, truly, and I really give you massive credit for being so detailed in the thought, even the winding way that you drive in here. I know that's all for a reason. The journey to get in here, and it seems nondescript until you're here, and then you look in here and you think this place is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's really neat that you.
Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Good luck with your company.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good.
All right. Thanks, Clay.
You're welcome.